What happens when a widow in her late 60s, who built her entire life on resilience, loyalty, and sacrifice, is branded a parasite by the very woman she took in and treated like family? What happens when that insult comes with a poisoned plate? This isn't just a family conflict, it's survival, and survival, in this story, comes with revenge served cold. My name is Eleanor Hayes, and I've lived through enough to know when someone wants me dead. The party was in full swing when it happened. Balloons bobbed against the ceiling, their metallic surfaces catching the afternoon light streaming through my dining room windows. The caterers moved efficiently between clusters of guests, their black uniforms making them nearly invisible against the backdrop of celebration. I sat in my usual chair by the window, watching. Lydia glided through the crowd like she owned the place, which, I suppose, was exactly what she intended. My daughter-in-law wore a cream-colored designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. Her blonde hair was styled in that effortless way that took 3 hours and $200 to achieve. She touched shoulders, laughed at the right moments, played the gracious hostess in my home. I watched her lean in to whisper something to Margaret Whitfield, our neighbor of 30 years. Margaret's eyes darted to me, then away. Another seed planted, another doubt sown about the old woman in the corner. Then Lydia was moving toward me, a plate balanced in her manicured hands. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floors my late husband James had installed himself, back when we couldn't afford contractors. She smiled, that practice smile I'd seen her perfect in front of mirrors when she thought no one was watching. "Eleanor," she said, setting the plate on the side table next to me. A salad, fresh greens, cherry tomatoes, something that looked like goat cheese. "I made this specially for you. You've barely eaten all day." She leaned closer. Her perfume, something French and suffocating, filling my nostrils. Her lips barely moved as she whispered, "You've been feeding off the dead long enough." The words hit me like ice water. My hand, reaching for the fork, stopped midair. I looked up at her face, searching for some sign that I'd misheard. But her eyes, those calculating blue eyes that my son Daniel had found so mesmerizing, told me everything. She straightened, smoothing her dress. "Eat up," she said, loud enough for others to hear. "We need to keep your strength up." Then she was gone, absorbed back into the party, leaving me with a plate of salad and a promise of death. I set the fork down carefully, my mind racing through memories like a deck of cards being shuffled. 23 years since James died, leaving me to raise Daniel alone. 23 years of 16-hour days keeping Hayes Construction Materials alive when everyone said a woman couldn't run a company. 23 years of sacrifice, of choosing Daniel's college fund over a new car, of missing vacations to close deals, of building something that would last. And now this woman, this stranger who'd swept into our lives 5 years ago, called me a parasite. My fingers trembled, but not from age or fear. Rage has a way of steadying the hand. I looked at the salad again. So innocent, so thoughtful. I remembered Lydia's sudden interest in nutrition, her insistence on preparing my meals. "For your health," she'd say, the dizzy spells that had started 3 months ago, the way Dr. Morrison had frowned at my last checkup, concerned about my declining vitals. "Feeding off the dead?" The phrase echoed as I watched her work the room, touching my friends, my business associates, the people who'd known me since before she was born. She moved through my life like she was already its owner, already writing my obituary. I didn't touch the salad. Instead, I waited until the server passed, then carefully transferred it to a container I kept in my purse, an old habit from years of saving leftovers, now serving a different purpose. The party continued around me. Laughter rang out from the kitchen, my kitchen where I'd taught Daniel to make pancakes. Someone clinked glasses by the fireplace James had built, and through it all, Lydia played the devoted daughter-in-law, checking on me with performed concern, making sure everyone saw how well she cared for the family matriarch. By the time the last guest left at 8:30 that evening, I'd made my decision. If Lydia wanted to play games with an old woman, she'd learn that some old women had survived far worse than her. I sat in my chair as the caterers cleaned up, watching her supervise with an owner's eye. She didn't know about the cameras I'd had installed last month, disguised as smoke detectors, invisible as the servants she ignored. She didn't know about the safe deposit box where I'd started keeping copies of everything. She didn't know that feeding off the dead had taught me one crucial lesson. The dead don't stay buried unless you bury them right. The truth about Lydia Carrington began with a phone call at 2:15 a.m. on a Tuesday 3 years ago. The police officer's voice was steady, practiced in delivering devastation. Daniel's car had wrapped around a tree on Route 9, blood alcohol level twice the legal limit, dead-on impact. I remember screaming. I remember Lydia's arms around me, her tears soaking my nightgown. I remember thinking, through the fog of grief, how lucky Daniel had been to find someone who loved him so completely. She moved in 2 weeks later, just temporarily, she'd said, one hand on her still flat belly. I can't stay in our apartment. Everything reminds me of him. Her parents lived in Seattle. Too far, she said. Her morning sickness was terrible. She needed family. I gave her Daniel's old room and watched her transform it, removing his baseball trophies and replacing them with scented candles. At the time, I thought it was healing. Now I see it for what it was, erasure. The manipulation started small. Lydia would forget to give me messages. "Oh, Eleanor, I'm so sorry. Doctor, Morrison's office called yesterday. I completely forgot with the pregnancy brain. Then important mail would go missing. Bills would arrive late, stamped with final notices I'd never seen. You're doing too much," she'd say, finding me in my home office at 10 p.m., sorting through contracts. "Let me help. Daniel would want me to take care of you." She'd bring me tea, chamomile, she said, for stress. I drank it gratefully, this gesture of care from the woman carrying my grandchild. When the headaches started, she had an explanation for that too. Grief. She said, exhaustion, age. After Rosie was born, Lydia's mask began to slip. I'd find her in my office, going through files, just looking for Rosie's insurance papers, she'd say. But the papers she disturbed were always about the company. Asset valuations, bank statements, the will I'd updated after James died. She started suggesting I was confused, in front of others, always with that concerned smile. "Eleanor, you already told that story when I hadn't. Are you sure you took your medication? When I knew I had, maybe you should rest when I was perfectly fine." The dinner parties were the worst. She'd invite my friends, my business associates, serve them wine in my crystal glasses and plant seeds of doubt. "We're worried about Eleanor," she'd murmur. "She's been forgetting things. Yesterday she didn't recognize the mailman." Lies wrapped in concern, poison dressed as care. 6 months ago, she started talking about the company. Hayes Construction Materials was worth $12 million on paper, more if you counted the real estate. Those debts Daniel left. She'd sigh. "Though Daniel had no debts, I'd made sure of that. The stress can't be good for you. Maybe it's time to let go." She'd found a buyer, she said, someone who'd take care of the employees, honor James's legacy. All I had to do was sign. I refused. That's when the real campaign began. My blood pressure medication vanished. "You must have misplaced it," Lydia said, helping me search. My reading glasses disappeared and reappeared in strange places. The freezer, the garage, the garden shed. "See?" she'd tell whoever was nearby. "This is what I mean." But it was Rosie who kept me silent. My granddaughter, with Daniel's dark eyes and James's stubborn chin. Lydia would hold her like a shield, knowing I'd never do anything to separate them. "Rosie needs stability," she'd remind me. "Growing up without a father is hard enough." The threat was clear. Fight me and lose her. So I stayed quiet as Lydia redecorated my home, replacing family photos with her own selections. I said nothing when she changed the locks for safety and forgot to give me the new keys. I bit my tongue when she introduced herself at gatherings as the one who takes care of Eleanor. But I watched. I listened. I learned. Lydia had a routine. Pills crushed into powder, stored in a vintage sugar bowl she thought I'd never notice. Phone calls taken in the garden. Her voice carrying through windows she didn't know I kept cracked. Papers drafted on her laptop, the one she didn't realize backed up to the cloud account Daniel had shared with me. She thought she was hunting a week-old woman. She didn't realize she was teaching a survivor exactly how she planned to kill her. The night of the party, after everyone had gone, I stood in my bathroom studying my reflection. 68 years old, widow, grandmother, target. But also, founder of a company that survived 2 recessions. Woman who buried a husband and a son without breaking. Mother who'd already lost everything that mattered except the granddaughter sleeping down the hall and the legacy in my safe. Lydia thought I'd been feeding off the dead. She had no idea how much fight the dead had left in me. I opened my medicine cabinet and counted the pills I'd been hiding, the ones I'd only pretended to take, my blood pressure medication, my heart pills, all the little chemical chains she'd tried to use to bind me. Tomorrow, I'd call Harry Benton. Tomorrow, I'd start documenting everything. Tonight, I locked my bedroom door and moved the dresser in front of it. Tonight, I prepared for war. The salad sat in my refrigerator for 12 hours before I drove it to Dr. Marcus Webb's private lab. Marcus had been James's friend before he was our doctor. 40 years of trust sealed our relationship better than any confidentiality agreement. "Eleanor," he said when I walked into his office at 7:30 a.m., carrying my insulated bag like a lunch pail, "you look worried." "I need a favor," I said, setting the container on his desk. "No questions, no records." He studied my face, then nodded. "What am I looking for?" "Anything that shouldn't be in a salad." 3 days later, he called me from his personal cell. "Come alone," he said. "Park in the back." The results were spread across his desk like evidence in a murder trial, which, I supposed, they were digitalis purpurea, foxglove, cardiac glycosides in concentrated form, the same compound found in heart medication, but at levels that would slowly destroy cardiac rhythm if administered over time. "This amount wouldn't kill immediately," Marcus explained, his face grave. "But regular doses would cause arrhythmia, confusion, vision problems, eventually, heart failure in an elderly patient. It would look entirely natural." I stared at the papers, my suspicions crystallizing into cold fact. "How long?" "At this concentration, 6 months, maybe less, depending on the frequency." I thought of all the meals Lydia had lovingly prepared, the teas, the supplements she insisted would help my energy. 6 months. She'd been patient, careful, medical in her approach to murder. That afternoon, I met Harry Benton at his law office. Harry had handled James's will, Daniel's estate, every legal matter that mattered, his secretary, who'd known me for 20 years. Didn't log my appointment. "I need surveillance equipment," I told him. "Cameras, audio, everything legal but invisible." Harry didn't ask why. He'd been practicing law for 50 years. He knew the look of a woman protecting herself. By the end of the week, professional installers disguised as air conditioning technicians had wired my house. 8 cameras, motion activated, with cloud storage and battery backup. Audio recorders in the kitchen, living room, and my office. Mabel noticed them first. My housekeeper had worked for me for 15 years. Quiet and observant as good help should be. She found me reviewing footage on my laptop one morning, Lydia clearly visible on the screen, pouring something into my coffee mug. "I saw her with white powder last week," Mabel said quietly, still dusting. "In a small envelope, she said it was sweetener." "What else have you seen?" Mabel set down her cloth. "Phone calls in the garden, always walking, never standing still. She mentions dosages, timelines, someone named Richard." "Would you testify to that?" "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Daniel was a good boy. This isn't right." I gave Mabel a raise and a burner phone. "If anything happens to me," I said, "call Harry immediately." The evidence accumulated like snowfall. Video of Lydia grinding pills in the kitchen at 5:45 a.m. Audio of her phone calls. She's more stubborn than expected. No, the dose is correct. Yes, I understand the timeline. I documented everything in triplicate. 1 copy in Harry's safe, 1 in a bank deposit box Lydia didn't know existed, 1 uploaded to a secure server Harry's investigator maintained. The hardest part was pretending, sitting across from her at dinner, watching her sprinkle something over my soup with a concerned smile. Extra minerals, she'd say. You need the nutrition. I'd eat enough to seem normal, then excuse myself and quietly vomit it back up. I started keeping protein bars in my bedroom, eating them late at night to maintain my strength. I let myself appear weaker, moving slower, forgetting more. See? I heard her tell someone on the phone. It's working. Another month, maybe 2. But I was getting stronger. Every piece of evidence was a brick in the wall I was building around Rosie and my legacy. Every recorded conversation was another nail in Lydia's coffin. Harry's investigator, a former detective named Patricia Cross, discovered more. Lydia Carrington wasn't even a real name. She'd been Lisa Carver from Newark, with a history of insurance settlements, an elderly aunt who died unexpectedly, leaving her everything. A boyfriend in college who'd had a fatal allergic reaction, despite having no known allergies. She's done this before, Patricia said, sliding photos across Harry's desk. Different names, same pattern. Get close to someone with money, become indispensable, then inherit when they tragically pass. I looked at the photos of her victims, an elderly woman in Boston, a widower in Philadelphia, all dead within a year of Lydia entering their lives, all from natural causes that weren't natural at all. Daniel, I whispered. Patricia's face was sympathetic but professional. We're pulling his hospital records now. The toxicology report from the accident was limited. They tested for alcohol and standard drugs, nothing more specific. I closed my eyes, seeing my son's face, remembering how he'd complained of being tired in the weeks before the accident, how Lydia had been so concerned, making him special smoothies for energy. When I opened my eyes, the grief had transformed into something harder, colder, more useful. Get me everything, I said, every record, every test, every detail from that night. The war I'd thought I was fighting for survival had become something else entirely. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about justice for Daniel, and God help anyone who stood in my way. Lydia's escalation began on a Thursday at 3:20 p.m. I was reviewing contracts in my office when she entered without knocking, carrying a tea tray like a 1950s housewife. "Your afternoon tea," she announced, setting the delicate china cup on my desk. Steam rose from the amber liquid, carrying the scent of chamomile and something else, something bitter beneath the honey. "How thoughtful," I said, not touching it. She lingered, straightening papers that didn't need straightening. "You really should drink it while it's hot. It's a special blend, for clarity." I lifted the cup, pretended to sip, then set it down. Delicious. Her smile tightened. "Drink it all. I'll wait." The cameras were recording. I thought of the evidence mounting in Harry's safe and forced myself to take another fake sip. "I'll finish it while I work. Thank you, dear." She left reluctantly. I waited 10 minutes, then poured the tea into a sealed container, lab sample number 15. The next morning, I found a manila envelope on my doorstep. No postmark. No return address. Inside, legal documents for a competency hearing, backdated and already filed with the court. The petitioner, Lydia Carrington, concerned family member. The grounds, diminished capacity, danger to herself and others, inability to manage financial affairs. Attached were affidavits. Margaret Whitfield swearing she'd seen me confused and disoriented. Dr. Kenneth Morrison, not my real doctor, but someone with a similar name, attesting to my declining mental state. 3 other neighbors, all describing incidents that had never happened. She'd been busier than I'd realized. That evening, she served dinner with her usual performance of care, roasted chicken, vegetables, a glass of wine she poured with special attention. I watched her hands, noticed the slight tremor of excitement. "Eleanor," she said as she set down my plate, We need to talk about Rosie's future. Oh? I've been thinking about guardianship papers. Just in case something happens, you're not getting younger, and with your recent episodes. What episodes? She sighed with practiced concern. Yesterday, you called me by Daniel's name, and last week, you tried to drive to the office at 2 a.m. I found you in the garage, confused. Lies delivered with the smoothness of truth. I felt the rage building, but kept my face carefully blank, the way I'd learned to do in business negotiations. I don't remember that, I said, playing into her narrative. That's what worries me. She pulled out documents. I've had papers drawn up. Simple guardianship transfer, just in case. I pretended to read them, though Patricia had already warned me they were coming. Hidden in the legal language were provisions that would give Lydia control of everything, not just Rosie, but my assets, my company, my life. I'll have Harry look at these, I said. Is that necessary? It's all standard, and Harry, well, he's getting older too. Maybe it's time for a younger lawyer. I know someone excellent. The next 3 days were a chess match played in my own home. She served me tea. I pretended to drink it. She prepared special meals. I ate just enough to seem compliant, then purged in private. She scheduled a doctor's appointment with her tame physician. I went, played confused, and recorded every word. The anonymous envelopes kept coming. Photos of me looking disoriented, cleverly cropped from moments when I was simply tired. A forged letter supposedly from me to my bank, requesting large withdrawals. False testimony from people I'd never met, all painting me as a danger to myself. Lydia grew bolder. She'd take phone calls in front of me now, barely bothering to disguise her words. The timeline needs to accelerate. No, she's more resistant than expected. Yes, I understand the urgency. One evening, as she prepared her special tea, I watched from the doorway. She didn't see me as she ground 3 different pills into powder, mixing them with practiced efficiency. The cameras caught every movement, every grain of poison she stirred into the china cup my mother had given me. Your tea, she said, finding me in the living room. Drink it while it's hot. In a moment. Now. Her voice had an edge. It doesn't work if it's cold. I looked at her, really looked at her. The mask was slipping. Behind the concerned daughter-in-law facade was something reptilian, calculating. She needed me to drink that tea. The timeline, whatever it was, demanded it. Actually, I said, I'm not feeling well. I think I'll go to bed early. After your tea? No. The word hung between us for a moment. Her face showed something raw and dangerous. You need your medicine, Eleanor. What medicine? This is tea. She recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. I meant the calming effects for your anxiety. I don't have anxiety. Yes, you do. You're anxious right now. Paranoid. It's why you need care. I stood, leaving the tea untouched. Good night, Lydia. As I walked to my room, I heard her on the phone, voice urgent. She's not cooperating. We need to move to the next phase. That night, I barricaded my door again and texted Patricia from my burner phone. She's escalating. How much more do we need? 2 more weeks, and came the reply. Harry says we need her attempting something on camera. Close, but not quite there. 2 more weeks of this dance. 2 more weeks of poison and lies. I looked at the photo of Daniel on my nightstand, then at little Rosie's picture beside it. 2 weeks was nothing compared to what Lydia had taken from me. I could survive 2 more weeks. The question was, could she? The call from Patricia came at 6 a.m. on a Sunday. We have the hospital records, she said. Can you meet? I drove to Harry's office in the pre-dawn darkness, my hands steady on the wheel despite what I knew I was about to learn. The truth about Daniel's death had been lurking at the edges of my consciousness for weeks, a shadow I'd been afraid to illuminate. Patricia had the documents spread across the conference table like evidence in a homicide trial, because that's what it was. The official toxicology report tested for alcohol and standard drugs, she began. But the blood samples were preserved. We had them retested at a private lab. She pushed a report toward me. The medical terminology swam before my eyes, but one line stood out. Presence of ethylene glycol metabolites consistent with ingestion 2, 4 hours prior to death. Antifreeze. My voice sounded distant, hollow. Not exactly, a similar compound, but more sophisticated. It metabolizes quickly, enhances the effects of alcohol dramatically. 2 drinks would hit like 8. Motor functions deteriorate rapidly. To a standard autopsy, it looks like severe intoxication. I stared at the paper, seeing Daniel's last day with new clarity, the dinner at our house, Lydia insisting on making him a special cocktail to celebrate his promotion. How tired he'd seemed afterward, how she'd pushed his keys into his hand, insisting he was fine to drive, that he was being paranoid. "There's more," Patricia said gently. "We found records of her purchasing the compound online, shipped to a P.O. box. The timeline matches." Harry placed bank records beside the toxicology report. She took out a life insurance policy on Daniel 6 months before his death. She was paying the premiums from a separate account. $1 million. That's what my son's life had been worth to her. The prescription bottles. I said suddenly, Daniel had prescriptions that went missing after the accident. Lydia said she threw them out. Too painful to see. What kind of prescriptions? Anxiety medication. He'd started having panic attacks a few months before he died. New job stress, Lydia said. Patricia made a note. Panic attacks can be chemically induced. We'll look into it. I sat back, the weight of premeditated murder settling on my shoulders. This woman hadn't just killed my son. She'd planned it, orchestrated it, played the grieving widow while cashing the check. Why not just arrest her? I asked. Harry's face was grim. A creative prosecutor might make a case, but it's been 3 years. The evidence is largely circumstantial. We need her current attempts on you to make everything else credible. So Daniel gets no justice unless I let her poison me? We're building a pattern, Patricia explained. The other victims, Daniel, now you, together, it's overwhelming. Separately, each case has doubt. That afternoon, I returned home to find Lydia in my office, my personal files spread across the desk. She didn't even flinch when I walked in. Looking for something? I asked. The Hayes Construction financial records. I need them for the guardianship hearing. What hearing? She smiled. That predator's smile I'd grown to recognize. Tuesday at 10 a.m., didn't you get the notice? Must have slipped my mind. That's the problem. Eleanor, everything slips your mind lately. She gathered the papers with deliberate slowness. Don't worry. I'll take care of everything, just like I took care of Daniel. The words hung in the air between us. She knew that I knew. The pretense was crumbling. That night, I found more evidence of her past. She'd been Linda Carson when she'd worked for Martin Blackwood, an elderly widower in Philadelphia. He died of a heart attack 8 months after hiring her as a home health aide. She'd inherited $400,000. Before that, Lisa Campbell in Boston, Regina Morse's niece. Supposedly, Regina had died of kidney failure after a brief illness. Lydia had been her sole beneficiary. 4 names, 4 victims, 4 fortunes stolen. And she'd refined her technique with each one. By the time she met Daniel, she was an expert, the grieving girlfriend playing the long game, poisoning him slowly while building her claim to his inheritance. I pulled out the photo albums from Daniel's childhood, running my fingers over images of birthday parties and Little League games. He'd been such a trusting soul. My boy, even as a child, he'd brought home strays, injured birds, lost dogs, broken people. Lydia had been his last stray, the one that killed him. At 3 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway. My barricaded door held, but I could see the shadow of feet in the gap underneath. The doorknob turned slowly, testing, then stopped. In the morning, I found powder residue on my bathroom counter. My toothbrush had been moved. The glass I kept by my sink had a faint chemical smell. She was done being patient. I thought of Daniel, of the life he should have had, the grandchildren he would have given me besides Rosie, the company he would have inherited and grown. all of it stolen by a woman who saw him as nothing more than a bank account with a pulse. 2 more weeks, I whispered to his photo. Then she pays for everything. But I was wrong about the timeline. Lydia had plans of her own, and patience was no longer part of them. The trap began with vulnerability. Calculated. Performed vulnerability that Lydia couldn't resist. I started leaving papers on my desk, documents about Hayes Construction's overseas accounts that didn't exist. I'd study them intently when she was nearby, then shuffle them away with exaggerated confusion when she entered. The cameras caught her photographing them with her phone after I'd gone to bed. "I can't find the Pemberton contract," I announced one morning, loud enough for her to hear from the kitchen. I fumbled through drawers, playing the part of a confused old woman. It was worth... How much was it worth? Lydia appeared in the doorway, eyes sharp with interest. "What contract, Eleanor?" "The Pemberton deal. Singapore, or was it Shanghai?" I pressed my fingers to my temples. 12 million? 20? I can't... The numbers keep mixing up. I watched her mental calculations, saw greed override caution. Within hours, she was on the phone in the garden. Yes, overseas accounts. No, she doesn't remember the details. The documentation is here somewhere. I scattered more breadcrumbs, a fabricated email about a safety deposit box in Miami, left open on my computer, a fake key taped under my desk drawer, which she found and pocketed within 2 days. Phone calls to my banker, actually Patricia, discussing transfers and liquidations, all performed when Lydia was within earshot. She took the bait like a starving fish. The decisive evening came on a Wednesday. Lydia prepared dinner with unusual care, candles, good china, a bottle of wine she'd selected herself. She wore a black dress, funeral appropriate. "We need to discuss your future," she said, pouring my wine with steady hands. "The guardianship hearing is tomorrow." "Is it?" I let my hand shake slightly as I reached for the glass. "You forgot, again." She slid papers across the table. "Sign these now, and we can avoid the embarrassment of a public hearing. It's better for everyone." I pretended to read, squinting at the text. "I should have Harry look at these." "Harry's not coming. Eleanor, you fired him, remember? Last week. You were quite cruel about it." A lie, but she'd already laid the groundwork, a forged letter on my stationery. Witnesses who'd swear they'd heard me ranting about lawyers stealing from me. I don't remember that." "Of course you don't." She pushed a pen into my hand. "Sign. It's for the best." I started to write, then stopped. "The tea," I said. "You forgot my evening tea." Irritation flashed across her face before she could mask it. "After you sign..." "I can't think without my tea. You know that." She left the room, and I heard her in the kitchen, preparing my special blend. The cameras would capture everything. The pills ground into powder, the careful stirring, the satisfied smile as she carried death in a china cup. "Drink," she commanded, setting it before me. "Then sign." I lifted the cup, smelled the bitter undertone of foxglove mixed with something new. She'd increased the dose. This wasn't about slow decline anymore. This was about finishing the job tonight. "It tastes different," I said. "It's a stronger blend, for clarity." Her fingers drummed against the table. "Drink it." I took a sip, held it in my mouth, then reached for a napkin and delicately spit it out while pretending to dab my lips. "Perfect," I said. "Just perfect." But she was watching too closely now. All of it, Eleanor. Every drop. "In a moment. Let me sign these papers first." "No. Tea first. That's the rule." I looked at her. Really looked at her. The mask had fallen completely. This was the face Daniel had seen in his final moments. I realized this calculated coldness. "You killed him," I said quietly. She went very still. "What?" "Daniel, you killed my son." "You're confused again. Daniel died in a car accident. He was drunk. He was poisoned, just like you're trying to poison me." She leaned back, studying me with those predator's eyes. Then she smiled. "Prove it." "I will." "No, you won't." She gestured to the tea. Because you're going to drink that, sign those papers, and then tragically succumb to the heart condition you've been hiding. I have all your medical records, the real ones and the ones I've created. By tomorrow morning, you'll be gone, and I'll be Rosie's sole guardian. No? Yes. She stood, walked around the table to stand behind me. Drink the tea. Eleanor, don't make this harder than necessary. Like you made it hard for Daniel? Her hand gripped my shoulder, nails digging in. Daniel was easy, too trusting, just like his mother. There it was, the confession I'd been waiting for, spoken clearly in my dining room where 3 cameras and 2 audio recorders captured every word. Get your hands off me, I said. Or what? You'll call for help? Mabel left hours ago. We're alone. But we weren't. Patricia had been waiting in the study, listening through the audio feed. Harry was in his car outside, ready to call the police the moment we had enough. One more chance, Lydia said, her grip tightening. Drink the tea, or I'll make you drink it. I knocked the cup over, sending poisoned liquid spreading across my grandmother's tablecloth. No. Her face contorted with rage. She grabbed the teapot, raising it like a weapon. And in that moment, I saw her for what she truly was, not a clever poisoner, but a cornered animal, desperate and dangerous. You stupid old woman, Mercy snarled. You should have just died like the others. But I didn't, I said, standing to face her, and neither will Rosie. The sound of sirens in the distance made her freeze. Her eyes darted to the windows, to the door, calculating escape routes. But it was too late. We had everything we needed. The trap had closed. The boardroom at Hayes Construction had never felt smaller. 20 people crowded around the mahogany table James had chosen 30 years ago. Board members, lawyers, 2 detectives, and Lydia, sitting at the far end in a cream suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She'd arrived confident, even after the police visit 2 nights before. Her lawyer had gotten her released on bail within hours. And she'd spun a story about misunderstandings and an elderly woman's paranoid delusions. Some people might have believed it. They wouldn't after today. Thank you all for coming, I said, taking my place at the head of the table. I know this is unusual, but recent events have made this meeting necessary. Lydia's lawyer, a sharp-dressed man named Brennan, interrupted. Mrs. Hayes, given your recent mental health struggles, perhaps someone else should lead this meeting. My mental health is fine. Mr. Brennan, as you're about to see. Harry stood, connecting his laptop to the projection system. What you're about to view has been authenticated by digital forensics experts and submitted to the district attorney's office. The first video began, Lydia in my kitchen at 5:43 a.m., grinding pills with practiced efficiency. The timestamp showed this was 3 weeks ago. Her face was clearly visible as she mixed the powder into my morning tea. That's vitamins, Lydia said quickly. Eleanor needs supplements. Video 2, Harry continued. This time, Lydia was on the phone in the garden. Her voice came through crystal clear. The old woman is taking too long. No, I can't increase it more without triggering an autopsy. Yes, I understand the timeline. Board members shifted uncomfortably. Lydia's confident mask began to crack. Video 3. The night she'd tried to force me to drink the tea, every word captured. Daniel was easy, too trusting, just like his mother. That's taken out of context, Brennan objected. Then, let's provide context, I said. Patricia handed out folders to everyone present. Toxicology reports showing cardiac glycosides in my system. Lab results from 14 different samples of food and drink Lydia prepared. Financial records showing patterns of suspicious transfers. And this, I placed Daniel's toxicology report on the table. Evidence that my son was murdered. The room erupted. Board members demanded explanations. Lawyers huddled in conferences. Through it all, Lydia sat frozen, calculating. There's more, Patricia announced. We've identified 4 other victims across 3 states. Same pattern, same methods, different names. She distributed photographs and death certificates. Martin Blackwood, Regina Morse, Sarah Chen, David Winters, all dead within a year of Lydia entering their lives. "You can't prove any of that," Lydia said, but her voice had lost its authority. "Actually, we can—" Detective Morrison, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. "Philadelphia PD reopened the Blackwood case based on our evidence. They're exhuming the body. Boston is doing the same with Regina Morse." I watched Lydia's face as her empire of lies collapsed. This was the moment I dreamed of, seeing her exposed, cornered, defeated. But instead of satisfaction, I felt only emptiness. This wouldn't bring Daniel back. "The guardianship papers," Harry continued, pulling out more documents. "Forged signatures, falsified medical reports, fraudulent affidavits, each one a separate felony charge." Brennan was on his feet. "My client needs time to review these allegations." "Your client," Detective Morrison said, standing, "needs to come with us. The bail has been revoked based on new evidence." But Lydia wasn't finished. She stood slowly, fixing me with those cold eyes. "You think you've won? You have no idea what you've done. Rosie needs a mother. You're just a bitter old woman who'll die alone." "Rosie has a family," I said. "She has me. She has this company's legacy. She has her father's memory, his true memory, not the lie you've been selling." "You killed him," she hissed, mask completely gone. "If you just accepted the buyout, if you just stepped aside, Daniel would still be alive. His death is on you." The confession hung in the air. Even Brennan looked stunned. "No," I said quietly. "His death is on you, and you'll pay for it." The detectives moved toward her. Lydia grabbed a glass paperweight from the table. James's paperweight, I noticed absurdly, and threw it at the window. Glass shattered, but there was nowhere to run. We were on the 10th floor. "Mrs. Carrington," Detective Morrison said, hand on his weapon, "step away from the window." She looked at me one last time. "He talked about you constantly. Eleanor this, Eleanor that, how proud he wanted to make you. It was pathetic. He was my son. He was weak, just like his father." The words were meant to wound, one final poison dart, but I'd built up immunity to her toxins. "Take her," I said. They cuffed her as she screamed about lawyers and lawsuits. Brennan followed, already on his phone, probably calculating his retainer. Board members filed out, murmuring about damage control and press releases. Soon, only Harry, Patricia, and I remained in the boardroom. "It's done," and Harry said gently. "No," I corrected. "It's beginning. The trials, the media, the explanations to Rosie when she's old enough to understand." Patricia gathered the evidence folders. "You did the right thing. She would have killed you." "She killed my son." The words still felt unreal. Everything else is just aftermath. That evening, I stood in Rosie's nursery, watching her sleep. She had Daniel's nose, his stubborn chin. Would she have his trusting nature too, his vulnerability to predators like Lydia? "I'll teach you to be stronger," I whispered. "Smarter. I'll teach you to see the poison before you taste it." The house felt different without Lydia's presence, lighter, somehow. Mabel had already begun removing her things, boxing up the designer clothes and jewelry bought with blood money. I walked to my office, sat at my desk, and pulled out a photograph, Daniel at his college graduation. Smile wide and future bright. "She confessed," I told him. "Everyone knows what she did, what she is." The photo, of course, said nothing, but somehow the silence felt like peace. Justice isn't revenge. It's just the beginning of learning to live with the aftermath. Tomorrow, I'd start teaching Rosie about her father, the real Daniel, not Lydia's fiction. Tonight, I'd simply remember my son and be grateful I'd lived long enough to give him justice. The morning Lydia left was unseasonably cold for September. Frost covered the garden where she'd made her poisonous phone calls, and I watched from my bedroom window as she loaded 2 suitcases into a taxi, all the court had allowed her to take. She'd been released on bail again, pending trial, but the conditions were strict. No contact with me or Rosie. No access to the house or company. Ankle monitor, passport surrendered. Her assets were frozen pending investigation. The designer clothes and jewelry would be sold to pay restitution to the other victims' families. She looked up once, finding my face in the window. For a moment, we stared at each other across the distance, predator and prey. Except I was no longer prey. Then she got in the taxi and disappeared from our lives. "Good riddance," Mabel said from behind me, holding Rosie, "though I'll be checking the locks twice every night for a while." I took my granddaughter, feeling her warm weight in my arms. "She can't hurt us anymore. The restraining order—" "Isn't what I mean," Mabel interrupted gently. "It's the knowing that she was here all that time. Planning and poisoning makes you doubt your judgment." She was right. The hardest part wasn't the attempted murder. It was the betrayal. The knowledge that I'd welcomed Daniel's killer into my home. Let her play grandmother to Rosie, trusted her tears at his funeral. But that was yesterday's pain. Today was about rebuilding. I spent the morning in Daniel's old room, now Rosie's nursery, removing every trace of Lydia. The scented candles went in the trash. The photos of her and Daniel came down, replaced with pictures of him alone or with me and James. I found one of Daniel at 6 months old, the same age Rosie was now, and placed them side by side. The resemblance was undeniable. "Your daddy was a good man," I told Rosie, who gurgled and reached for the photo. "Too trusting, maybe, but kind. I'll teach you to be both kind and careful. It's a hard balance, but possible." Harry called at noon. "The Philadelphia DA wants to meet. Boston, too. They're building RICO charges, organized crime, given the pattern across state lines." "Will I have to testify?" "Probably, but Eleanor, with what we have, she'll likely take a plea, 25 to life if she's lucky." 25 years. She'd be nearly 60 when she got out, if she lived that long. It wasn't enough for Daniel, but it was something. That afternoon, I returned to the office for the first time in weeks. The staff tried not to stare, but I could feel their curiosity, their concern. I called an all-hands meeting in the main conference room. "You've heard rumors," I began, looking at the faces of people who'd worked for Hayes Construction for years. "Let me give you facts. Lydia Carrington attempted to murder me for control of this company. She also killed my son. She's been arrested and will likely spend the rest of her life in prison." Shocked murmurs rippled through the room. "This company survived my husband's death. It survived my son's death. It will survive this. We build things that last. That's what we do. That's what we'll continue to do." By the time I finished, there were tears on some faces, determination on others. These people had been Daniel's legacy too, and they deserved the truth. The weeks that followed blurred together. Legal meetings, asset evaluations, therapy appointments that Harry insisted on and I reluctantly attended. Slowly, the house began to feel like home again instead of a crime scene. I had the locks changed anyway, and installed a better security system, and started keeping a journal, documenting everything for Rosie, not the poison and lies, but the truth about her father, his favorite songs, his terrible jokes, the way he'd light up when he talked about architecture. One evening, as October painted the leaves gold, I sat in my garden with Patricia and Harry, watching Rosie crawl on a blanket. "She's fast," Patricia observed, "going to be a runner." "Like her father," I said. "He ran track in high school. Lydia probably didn't know that." We sat in comfortable silence. 3 old soldiers who'd won an ugly war. The company was secure. Rosie was safe. Justice, imperfect but real, was being served. "What now?" Harry asked eventually. I picked up Rosie, who immediately grabbed for my necklace, the one James had given me 40 years ago. Now we live, we build, we remember the good and learn from the bad. We make sure Rosie knows she's loved. "And Lydia?" "Lydia is the past. She has no place in our future." As if understanding, Rosie laughed, pure baby joy that had nothing to do with poison or revenge or loss, just happiness in the moment, in being alive and loved. I stood, holding her close, and walked to the edge of the garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold somewhere. Lydia was facing her first night in a cell, contemplating decades more, somewhere. The families of her other victims were learning they might finally have justice. But here, in this garden where evil had whispered its plans, a grandmother and granddaughter were writing a different story, one of survival and strength, of love that endures even the worst betrayals. "Come on, sweet girl," I murmured to Rosie. "Let's go inside. It's getting cold." I locked the door behind us, a new habit that would probably last forever. But I didn't look back at the garden, didn't check the windows twice, didn't let fear follow us inside. Lydia had taken enough. She wouldn't take another moment. In the warmth of my kitchen, I heated Rosie's bottle, formula I'd prepared myself. From powder I'd bought myself. With water I'd watched boil. Trust would return slowly, in small acts of daily courage. Outside, the cold morning had turned into a cold night, but inside we were warm, safe, and free. The revenge was complete not in Lydia's destruction, but in our survival, in Rosie's laughter, in tomorrow's promise. And that was enough. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and let me know your thoughts on Eleanor's journey. Your perspectives and experiences make these stories richer for everyone.